Hello, my name is Liss van Wyk. I am from Irvine Valley College, and today I will be discussing my research project on developmental effects of mainstream schools on deaf individuals. For context, in our society, there are differing opinions among deaf and hearing people regarding mainstream education for deaf individuals. I wanted to know what effects mainstreaming has on deaf individuals and the implications of these effects. I specifically focused on the developmental and social aspects as psychology is an interest of mine I have experience in. For additional context, deaf with a lowercase is not the same as deaf with an uppercase. Deaf with an uppercase refers to deaf culture in the deaf community, whereas deaf with a lowercase simply refers to the audiological condition. For my research paper, I have answered several questions. The first of which is, what is mainstreaming and the concept of least restrictive environment? Mainstreaming, in the context of my research paper, refers to the integration of deaf people into public high schools. The common practice of mainstreaming is mainly due to the concept of least restrictive environment. The concept of least restrictive environment comes from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which makes free public education available to children with disabilities. Due to the common acceptance by the hearing majority that being deaf is a disability, this applies to deaf children. What are the difficulties experienced by deaf individuals in mainstream school? The difficulties experienced by mainstream deaf children are, as expected, heavily communication based. Deaf children struggle to communicate effectively with teachers and peers, which leads to misunderstanding course content and instructions, as well as often becoming socially isolated from peers. This is true even with interpreters, as they are sometimes not fluent, may overcomplicate or oversimplify what they are translating, may not understand the course content themselves, and in regards to peer socialization, it is difficult for children to feel comfortable talking to each other through an adult, especially older children. When it comes to deaf people who are culturally deaf, there are added factors to consider. Culturally deaf individuals struggle in mainstream schools additionally because they are placed in a school with people who don't share nor typically understand their cultural experience, including their positive attitude in regards to their audiological condition, their language, and their collectivist mindset, in contrast to typical American individualist mindset. What are the social, psychological, and developmental effects of mainstreaming? It has been shown that deaf children become communicatively and socially isolated in mainstream schools where they are the minority among hearing peers and teachers. Social isolation is particularly harmful to children and has been linked to higher cortisol levels and faulty cognitive development. Mainstreaming thus does not provide a productive environment for their developing minds. Social isolation, as experienced by mainstreamed individuals, has been linked to increased levels of depression and anxiety. What is a good alternative to mainstreaming? Compared to mainstreaming, the bilingual bicultural movement in education has received much better results. This model teaches ASL as the primary language to deaf students and encourages deaf cultural values, while teaching English as a second language for students to read and write in with respect to their tendency toward visual learning. Why bilingual bicultural in regards to language development? This language model is important as acquiring a language early on in childhood aids cognitive and social development. Additionally, ASL as a first language contributes to a deaf child's ability to acquire English as an additional language, which is a necessary language in our society, and it helps bridge the language gap experienced by deaf individuals. Why bilingual bicultural in regards to cultural development? There are many positives in being part of the deaf community, thus, deaf individuals who grew up mainstreamed and withheld from deaf culture often find themselves angry later on in their lives that they missed out on the positive cultural experience. Instead, they were taught that they were lacking, which led to negative self image and other frustrations. They often experience language deprivation as well and the negative effects thereof. This school model introduces deaf children to deaf culture while maintaining a balance with general American culture. To conclude, in my research, there has yet to be proven positives experienced by deaf children who are mainstreamed, yet hearing society still largely has the false perception that, since these children are placed in the same classes as their hearing peers, they experience the same opportunities. It is vital that this misconception is addressed in the education system. People who intend to pursue careers in education should be made aware of this research in order to advocate for deaf students of the school they work at and to better understand their psychosocial and cultural struggles and resulting developmental needs. Additionally, I would like to conclude with the quote that inspired my research from Carol J. Erding's Cultural Conflict in a School for Deaf Children. And it goes, The challenge that deafness presents to the deaf individual's notion of selfhood first occurs when it is perceived as an aspect of the self not shared by the majority. Thank you so much. These are my references. There's 4 pages.